During the quarterly meeting between the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and political parties last week, the Commission's chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, complained at the inability of parties to conduct each free primaries. He regretted that party candidates are now determined through litigation long after elections have been concluded and winners declared. He stated that the problem lies with the conduct of party primaries and nomination of candidates by political parties that ignore regulations and urge parties to oppose standards to avoid sanctions.
The Commission is not happy that candidates for elections are now being determined through litigation long after elections have been concluded and winners declared by INEC. The problem lies squarely with the conduct of party primaries and nomination of candidates by some political parties. We urge you to hold yourselves to the same high standard of free, fair, and credible elections that you hold INEC in all elections. Infographics containing the summary of the new distribution of polling units in Nigeria is contained in your folders for this meeting. We believe that political parties will use the information in planning for future elections, including the nomination of their polling agents for elections at PU level.
The Inter-Party Advisory Council, which I'm privileged to lead, is in advanced partnership discussion stage with the Chartered Institute of Forensics and Certified Fraud Examiners of Nigeria to help strengthen capacity of political parties to conduct proper and professional due diligence on aspirants seeking to contest for various positions under the platforms of various political parties in the country before after elections, and to also support in the party primaries that is currently ongoing. We are hopeful that this effort will yield positive results.
In the same week, the Commission announced it had removed polling units from inappropriate places and worship centers across the country and created about 57,000 new polling units for Nigeria's 2023 election. With the creation of the new units, Nigeria now has 176,846 full-fledged polling units against its initial 119,974 polling units in the states and Federal Capital Territory.
Following several unsuccessful attempts to create additional polling units, despite the obvious pressure from increased number of registered voters, the Commission established the voting points and voting point settlements across the states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory as a pragmatic response to necessity. The voting points were tied to the existing polling units and voting point settlements. The number of registered voters in a polling unit and the voting point settlement in the FCT was used to determine their voting points based on the upper threshold of 500 and lower threshold of 700 voters respectively. There were also limits used. These were also the limits used for the 2019 general election. The number of new polling units in a state is the number of voting points aggregated from these polling units, particularly those having voting points.
Joining us to discuss this development and many other topical issues in Nigeria is Senator Ayogu Eze, former senator representing Enugu North Senatorial District under the platform of the People's Democratic Party, and later an All Progressives Congress governorship candidate for Enugu State. Good to have you join us on this live, Senator Ayogu Eze. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Ruben.
Well, Senator Ayogu Eze, it's good to have you on the program. Great delight. But first, let's start with the quarterly meeting that was recently held with the political parties by the Independent National Electoral Commission, led by Professor Mahmood Yakubu. At that meeting, the big point was about how political parties and candidates now rely more on the rulings of the courts due, in the view of INEC, to the failure of internal democracy, to abuses at the level of political primaries, to abuses in terms of the choice of candidates. And the INEC chairman, and I guess INEC as an institution, believe that this in itself abbreviates the integrity of the electoral process, and that political parties have to do a lot more in this regard. This is not the first time that INEC will be making this statement. After the 2015 election, this same INEC, under Professor Yakubu's watch, said the same thing. Is there any guarantee that the political parties will listen? Is there any guarantee that we will see any change in terms of how political parties manage their own internal democracy? As someone who has been part of this process since 1998, although you have potted from one political party to the other, but you have the relevant experience. What do you think is the problem?
Well, Ruben, I think that I agree with the INEC chairman to a large extent that there is need for probity, transparency, and straightforwardness in the conduct of the affairs of political parties. But I don't think that is as simple as he has made it look, because it's a convoluted matter involving all facets, all stakeholders, the parties themselves, the judiciary that we're talking about, and the INEC. Because if you look at the electoral landscape in Nigeria, it is one that is mired in the attempt of some of these three stakeholders I mentioned in trying to see who takes an upper hand. I've known about cases where INEC itself, maybe not at the present time, have tried to interfere in the affairs of political parties. I give you an instance in Enugu, and I will not call names. In 2007, there was an INEC chairman, or INEC officer, not the chairman actually, who had an in-law in Enugu who was running for the House of Representatives on the platform of an unknown political party. But there was a candidate who was supposed to return to the House of Reps. I think that was 2007 or 2011. And unknown to the political party, after they had done the normal primaries and selected this experienced candidate to go back to the House, the INEC officer stayed in his office and wrote a different result that was supposed to bring in the candidate that did not participate. And like the chairman of INEC said, even the judiciary itself cannot claim that their hands are clean in what is going on. Because there have been cases where even judicial officers have made pronouncements after their own judgments that they cannot vouch for the integrity and the veracity, or rather the relevance to the laws of Nigeria, of the pronouncements they have made. We've seen election cases where courts of coordinated jurisdiction sitting in different divisions have given conflicting statements. The Court of Appeal in Lagos will say one thing, the Court of Appeal in Abuja will say another, and the Court of Appeal in Sokoto will say another. These are, the landscape is replete with all those cases. So I think the appeal should be not just to the parties, which I believe is the primary organ or primary agency that mails or produces candidates. But when this candidate is already produced, all the people that are involved in the processing of this candidate for election should live above board. And INEC is one of them. The judiciary, as the chairman has said, is also not an arbiter that does not have interest. It's not a free agent. I believe that everybody, all hands should be on deck. Yes, the party should do primaries that will stand the test of time, because in Nigeria, no matter how you do the primaries, our people are going to litigate anyway. But in doing so, the court should look at the facts and not jump and make decisions based on their own preferences and their own prejudices. So I think, yes, INEC chairman is right, but I think it's much more than just getting it right at the party level.
Well, Senator Ayogu Eze, someone listening to you may think that you are making this kind of submission on the basis of self-interest. You recall that in 2015, after leaving the Senate, you had tried to run for the position of governor in Enugu State, your state. And then, of course, it didn't go your way. It went the way of Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi, who is now the incumbent governor of that state. And you went to court, all the way, appeal court, to the Supreme Court, challenging the outcome of the primaries. So is this a case of you aligning with the INEC chairman in one regard as a result of what you yourself experienced? And subsequently, you left the PDP, the party on the basis of which you had been commissioner twice, you had been senator twice, and then you left for the APC, on the platform of which you ran for governor in 2019, and then again lost to Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi. Will it be right to make such allegations?
Well, unfortunately, Ruben, what happened does not apply to me in any way, because the court pronouncement in my case was nearly consistent at all levels. So the inconsistencies did not apply to me. And I am not aligning with INEC because I have a beef with the court. No, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about the processes, and you cannot push me to go and mention specific cases, because these cases affect individuals, they affect judges, they affect courts, and these are people who are living or who are still in office as of today. I can only tell you, because I know that you are a man who is very well versed in current affairs in Nigeria, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It is not about whether I ran against the incumbent governor in Enugu, or whether I left the PDP and went to the APC. It's neither, that is not part of it at all. What I'm saying is, the case that the chairman was making is that if the parties get their acts right, maybe it will extinguish the urge or the desire or the readiness of Nigerians to always go and challenge the outcomes of primaries. And then align with the aspirations of INEC, and I think a lot of Nigerians, that election cases and election matters should be exhaustively disposed of or dealt with before the beneficiary of that office, be he senator, House of Rep member, governor, or president, is inaugurated into office. Because that way, the person coming into the office will come with a peace of mind that there are no litigations outstanding against him or her, and he can concentrate and hit the ground running with his or her program from day one. I think that's the point I was making.
Okay, let's go back to the original point made by the INEC chairman. He was saying that frivolous litigation will not only undermine the process, it will also derail the election timetable. But there is the question about the fundamental rights of the aspirant or the candidate. Regardless of whatever the INEC chairman is saying, don't individuals have the right, whether they are right or not, whether they are forum shopping or not in the temple of justice, don't they have a right to just go and test the laws, to say, well, the primaries didn't go right, I thought I should have won. The judiciary being part of the electoral process. Can we accuse of the INEC chairman of trying to abbreviate the rights of candidates?
Well, I don't think that that charge will be fair on the INEC chairman. Yes, as it is now, considering the statutes that we have in the country, the Constitution, the Electoral Act, and all the other laws, it will amount to the abridgment of the rights granted the citizens in our grand norm and other legislations in the country. But what he's talking about is what is desirable. And luckily for us, at this point in time, the National Assembly is dealing with tinkering with the Electoral Act and also amending the Constitution. We can begin to set thresholds, in those two crucial laws for what can qualify or what can be allowed to go to the courts after every primary or after every election. I also think that what happens in the field of business, where there's mediation, should come into play. We can create such structures in the electoral process, because if there is a disagreement in the area of business relationship, for instance, first of all, you go for mediation. If you don't succeed at mediation, you may go for arbitration before you finally decide to go to litigation. In fact, there's not too much difference between arbitration and litigation, because appeals can lie from arbitration to higher courts of records. But I think that if we try to use the Electoral Act and use the Constitution to create structures that will discourage a lot of people from just filing petitions for the sake of filing petitions. Because I agree completely with you and with the INEC chairman that quite a lot of petitions, a plethora of petitions that follow our elections are very frivolous and should not ordinarily be allowed to see the light of day. But then, once there's freedom for people to do what the Constitution has granted them, you cannot, the registrars cannot ask them, take this back, this is frivolous. That will be determined by the legal process. When the litigation process kicks off, the value of every litigation will be determined as it goes along. So I agree with you that it is really not a problem that lends itself to a very ready or easy solution. It is something that should agitate the conscience and minds of Nigerians so that we'll stop being a laughing stock. In fact, you saw what happened in America recently. It became something of grave concern for the entire world when the former president and some members of his party started behaving like African people, challenging every opportunity and filing every frivolous litigation on every item of the election just to hang on to power like an African man. So we should be able to get our democracy and our electoral process and democracy to the level where if you do what was done in America, eyebrows will be raised. They'll be saying, what is going on? So I believe that it's work in progress, but this work should be fast-tracked. It should be moved forward so that we cannot continue to be a baby democracy forever. So this is my take on it.
Okay, one other issue that came out from INEC this week, or if you like last week, is the creation of 56,872 new polling units. Those new polling units were converted from voting units that had been in place, raising the number of polling stations in Nigeria from 119,000 plus to a total of 176,000 plus. But you know that this has been very controversial. In the past, Professor Atahiru Jega tried to review the polling units ahead of the 2015 elections. It became controversial along ethnic lines. He was accused of giving more polling stations to the north. In the lead-up to the 2019 general election, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu also tried to do it. He dropped it for the same reason of ethnic politics. But this time around, he's been able to get around with it. And one of the major revolutions is that over 700 polling stations are, polling stations belonging to shrines, traditional palaces, mosques, and churches. And that, over 700 of them have been eliminated. Many Nigerians will be surprised that we have polling stations in shrines and mosques and traditional, rulers' palaces. But on the whole, the big question is that we still have more polling units in the northern part of the country, 19 states and the FCT, and then in the southern part of the country, the additional, polling units are lower in terms of number compared to the north. Do you have any concerns in this regard, or you think that INEC needs to be more transparent in terms of how they arrived at those polling units?
Yes, thank you, Ruben. I believe that the issue that is sticking out in all you have said is transparency. If the process is transparent, I believe that it doesn't really matter where these polling units are located if they are following verifiable delineatory parameters that have been set by INEC or set by population experts in trying to create such delimitations. I don't believe that we should cry over everything, because if you look at even the polling units as they were before, there were still always more polling units in one part of the country than the other. So this did not maybe significantly depart from what the trend was. But I believe that if INEC were more transparent in their dealing, maybe more people will go with them. I am not really worried about where these polling units are located, because it's neither here nor there. Again, I take you back to the US. There's currently a delimitation that is about to happen in the US, and some constituencies, federal constituencies, are going to lose their representatives in the US Congress and lose them to areas that are dominated by, they are likely to be the Democratic constituencies that are losing to the Republican constituencies. So this is something that is an established process in democracies, that after some time, you look at demographics, look at population, look at issues in population growth and all that, and try to make constituencies or wards or polling units to follow those population trends. I also believe that I am one of the persons that is happy that INEC has been able to convert these voting points to wards, because these voting points in the past has been used to rig elections, because they are not made open to all the candidates. What they do is, if you have a relationship with your electoral officer or with the INEC person in charge, the supervisor, they can make those voting points known to you. And those voting points become a point where they go and rig elections. So now it is proper that these voting points are unmasked and created as polling units, so that everybody from day one, as INEC had urged us, can plan along those lines. Because you didn't plan along voting points because you didn't know where they were. There was something like secrets that were kept in INEC shrines, and they were using it the way they liked. So I'm very, very happy that there are, and I'm also encouraged by the statement of the INEC chairman that voting points will no longer be used, because these voting points became points of abuse. They were no longer points of voting. When you defeat a candidate in a ward, unknown to you, there is a voting point attached, in a polling unit. Unknown to you, there will be a voting point attached to that polling unit, and the people who have the privilege of knowing about the voting points, or who have the relationship with the relevant INEC officer, will go behind you and inflate figures through those voting points. So I believe that it is a step in the right direction, that these voting points have been undressed in the public so everybody can see them. There's no hiding place anymore for anybody who is looking for a monkey business to do in an election. So I believe that the issue I have with it is, so long as there's transparency in the process and all stakeholders were carried along, as the chairman has said, I believe that we should learn to trust people who are working for the country. And I believe that we should also look at growing our democracy to a point where we begin to de-emphasize ethnicity, begin to de-emphasize region, and begin to de-emphasize personalities. If you look at the example of the US I just gave to you, they're talking about between the Republicans and the Democrats, who is going to have an advantage. Let's talk about such ideological orientations, instead of talking about whether I'm from Enugu or whether you are from or your state, where you also recently ran an election as deputy governor, because you keep pushing it to me, and you don't want Nigerians to remember that you were an immediate past deputy governorship candidate on the platform of PDP. So I can also accuse you that you are pushing me because of politics. You are playing PDP politics to an APC gubernatorial candidate. So I want you to defend yourself, Ruben.
Senator Ayogu Eze, I'm sure you remember that saying that dogs don't eat dog. You eat dogs. You and I will come from the same constituency, from the Guardian, way back. But let's just focus on the interview. Yes. You are the
we've
person
come a long way
on the hot seat. You know, I was going to ask you, when you talk about shrines, and you talk about voting points having been turned into shrines by the INEC. Are you saying that those inappropriate places that the Independent National Electoral Commission of Nigeria has been talking about, that in fact those shrines are shrines created by INEC?
No, I wasn't talking about shrines in the literal sense that the INEC chairman spoke about those shrines. Yes, the shrines are different, but I spoke about metaphorical shrine with its inscrutability and inaccessibility to those who are not friends or favored by the relevant INEC officials who are in the field. That was the shrine I was talking about. It's a metaphorical shrine, not the physical one that INEC chairman was referring to. Yes, if there were polling units in the homes of very powerful people in shrines and in palaces, I believe that it is proper to relocate them. I don't believe that they should be removed completely or that they should be erased from our records. Those people who are voting there. If they really have registrants who are up to 500 and that made them qualify as voting units in the first place, they should be restored. They shouldn't, and there are not too many, because he said about 732,000, 732 or
749.
So. Yeah, 749 or something like that.
Yeah.
Those are not too many for INEC to spend some time and give them proper voting unit status and relocate them to public places. And I also think that INEC can locate polling units even in open places, as is done in other democracies. On that day, they will bring their collapsible voting cubicles and place in those places and get people who are registered in those areas to come out and vote. It is not justiciable. It is not fair. It's not really correct that their solution is to remove them completely. I don't believe that that is right. They should be able to use them, but then make sure that they are not in the recesses of the homes, of the shrines, of our individuals, because I don't know whether by shrine he was talking about personalities or he was talking about physical shrines. Whatever it is, they should not punish the people who are voting at those places because of the actions of those people who influence the location of those polling units in those places. I believe that's not fair.
Well, Senator Ayogu Eze, INEC, the Electoral Commission, has announced its plans to commence its program of continuous voter registration by June 28, this month. It announced that first in April. Now we're in the month of June. It wants to go ahead with it. Now, what's your assessment of the possibility, the viability of that program, that plan, considering the fact that in many parts of the country, security is still a major problem? Do you think that this registration exercise is going to be met with gross apathy, particularly in the southeastern part of Nigeria, where you hail from?
Well, I believe that the security situation in the country will not stop INEC from performing its statutory responsibility given to it by law. INEC should do so, but the government at all levels also should rise up to beefing up security so that INEC can go about its duty freely without hindrance. I believe that Southeast is not as bad as people think. Southeast will shock you because I'm sure that you saw in the news yesterday that our leaders and the governors met again in Enugu, and they made very categorical statements about the security situation and their resolve to embark on a multi-pronged approach to resolving the issue in the Southeast permanently. First of all, dialogue. Secondly, engagement of all the people who feel aggrieved. And of course, emboldening the Ebubago security and equipping it to be able to take the battle to those who refuse to yield to dialogue and yield to conversation and discussion with our leaders. So I believe that before that process starts, things will be a bit very, very almost near normal. Because if you notice, in the past 1 or 2 weeks, the Southeast has been quiet. The hotbed used to be maybe somewhere in Imo State or thereabout, but you are not hearing anything again, which means that the dialogue embarked upon by our people, the visitation to the Southeast by the leader, the delegation that was sent by the president, and the conversations they've had about putting a security architecture in place and putting also a dialogue architecture in place to go along with the security architecture. It seems to be yielding a lot of fruit. The carrot and stick method is really yielding a lot of fruits, and the place is already very quiet. So I don't think that the worry will be about the Southeast. The worry will be about other areas that are still very hot beds of banditry and criminal activities across the country. So if you ask me, I believe that rather than look at the Southeast with pity, we should be commending our leaders in the Southeast, and we commend the government and the people of Enugu State, who have always provided the opportunity for the Igbos and the Southeast leaders to come and talk. Because if you notice, Enugu is relatively one of the most peaceful states within the Southeast geopolitical zone. And in fact, the former two, the immediate, no, not the immediate past IGP, but the one that left before him, I think his name was Boto, had named Enugu as one of the most peaceful states in the country then, before this eruption of agitations for self-determination, for separation, and for Biafra, and for what have you. So I believe that the Southeast is getting it right. They are getting it right.
Senator Eze, except that in the Southeast, the major problem is that whereas there is a consensus among the elites, seemingly, we may say, that the Southeast would like to remain in Nigeria and that issues of concern can be resolved within the Nigerian framework. You have the youths of the Southeast who seem to be on another page. And there have been allegations that, the elites in the Southeast are not on the same page with the young people, majority of whom are in IPOB or EPOB, as President Buhari calls it, and that all these people who want to go to Dotland, I hear there's a phrase called Dotland, or maybe Biafra, they are completely opposed to the elites, people like you, who think that Nigeria is still a possibility. What do you say to that? Because you may not be representing the views of the collective in the Southeast.
Well, Ruben, I would just like you to take a look at what is happening in the country. The youths are generally restive. It's not a Southeast thing. And the youths have not been the ones that have determined the course of nations in history. So I believe that if you look at NSAS, you look at the agitation for Oduwa Republic, you look at the agitation for the Middle Belt Republic, you look at the agitation for Arewa Republic. These are agitations that are championed by restless and unemployed youths. All we need to do as leaders is to do our work of sitting down and dreaming out jobs, dreaming out schemes that will create gainful employment for our youth. If these people who are doing this are busy in their offices or busy in their industrial complexes or busy in their entrepreneurial engagements, they will not have time to come and talk about where they will go, and they will not have time to come and abuse us, the leaders. They will not have time to come and indulge in NSAS, because the central message in all of this, including what is happening in the Middle Belt, in the South-South, in the Southeast, in the Northwest, and in the Northeast. It is restless youths. So we need to find a way to engage the energy of the youths and bring that energy and give it a direction that will be beneficial to the country. Because as long as these youths are loose without having a means of livelihood, they will continue to indulge in mischief. Because they tell us in local parlance that the devil finds job for an idle hand. So the idle mind is the devil's workshop. So that comes into bolder relief when you look at the situation in Nigeria. Because 90%, in fact, I saw on your program, or was it on channels the other day, that what happened when there was NSAS in Lekki was that quite a number of people, I think it was on your program, ended up coming out every morning so that they were able to get pepper soup, they were able to get moi moi, they were able to get a plate of rice. So what is the attraction is really not the message that NSAS was sending for a majority of them. The attraction was to have something to calm the tempest in their stomach and be sure that they've taken care of that day. And that happened even during the demonstrations that was sponsored in the time of Jonathan, where they were talking about fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy thing was sustained by people who were steadily cooking food, bringing grade A musicians to entertain people at various locations in Lagos and other parts of the country. What was attracting the people there, the young people there, was food, drink, and merriment, and good music. Because they couldn't provide this by themselves. And that is the situation in which you are today. So I believe that our leaders, including myself, should wear our thinking cap and re-engineer our economy to be able to provide for our youth. I remember that in a time not too long ago, while you are about to graduate from the university, these companies will send their people to come and look at people who are doing students who are doing very well in universities. And they were offered jobs even before they left school with good pay and with a car. That is still doable because the resource base of this country can still sustain such a thing. So I think we need to work our way back. Wherever we came from to land where we are, we need to work our way back.
Well, Senator Eze, as we begin to wrap up this conversation, I would like to ask you about constitutional amendment and also about the need to come up with a proper, appropriate, relevant, acceptable electoral framework for the 2023 general elections. I recall that as a senator, you were a member of the Constitution Amendment Committee. And now again, we're back to that situation whereby amendments have been proposed to the 1999 Constitution. And also there's a lot of talk about the need for an amendment of the Electoral Act 2010. In 2019, ahead of the election, we couldn't do that because it was said by the time the process with regard to the Electoral Act was concluded, it was too late to make any difference. What will you recommend to the National Assembly? And what kind of amendments would you like to see on both sides, the Constitution and also the Electoral Act?
Well, I will first of all commend my colleagues at the National Assembly for the good work they've done for this country over the years, because even though I believe that it's not peculiar to this country, people's good deeds are in this country often interred even with them, even while they're in office. Nobody remembers that there was a time that this country seesawed and teetered on the edge of a major calamitous and precipitous crisis. And it was the National Assembly that came with the doctrine of necessity to save the country from going up in flames. And nobody gives them that credit anymore. Everybody is just saying this National Assembly has failed, this one has failed, that one has failed. You cannot be in the National Assembly and get it right. The National Assembly is not dropping from the moon. The National Assembly is an institution in Nigeria. And what ails Nigeria ails the National Assembly. What aches Nigeria aches the National Assembly. And the healing of the ache must be a holistic, wholesome healing. You cannot heal in the National Assembly and not heal in the executive. You cannot heal in the executive and not heal in the judiciary. And so this is something that we need to get right. Having said so, I want to think that I need to appeal to them to speed up the process of the amendment of the Electoral Act so that the parties have enough time to acquaint themselves with the Electoral Act and be able to prepare their primaries and their congresses and conventions along the lines of those relevant sections that may have been introduced in the new Electoral Act. For instance, the INEC chairman is wishing, and a lot of Nigerians too, that after every election, all litigations should be extinguished before the successful candidate is inaugurated into office, before he's sworn in. That's agreeable to me, and it's something that we're all of us looking forward to. But how are you going to do it without abridging the freedom you spoke about of the individual, without abridging the liberty of the judicial system to allow every case to get exhausted? I believe that between the INEC, the National Assembly, and some legal pundits within the country, they should be able to find a legal architecture that will give us an opportunity to finish with election processes before people are inaugurated in office. And I also believe that the dates for elections should be sacrosanct. This issue of litigations changing the electoral geography of a number of states should not have been allowed in the first instance, so that all elections can come the same day. You can argue that in some democracies that is also allowed. But those ones were put there, in the case of US was put there by deliberate choice. The same thing they did in the National Assembly. The whole idea is to make sure that the National Assembly does not completely vacate and therefore begin to start afresh at all times. So I would like to see, both in the Constitution and in the Electoral Act, a situation where we stagger the elections of the National Assembly in such a manner that there will be midterm elections and there will be general elections, so that every point in time, the National Assembly and the state assemblies are in process, they are in session, and they are ongoing, so that you don't, this issue of proclamation of the National Assembly is also, in my own opinion, an interference by the executive branch in the affairs of the legislature. Because you cannot be allowing the executive to come and be proclaiming the National Assembly or the State Assembly when the State Assembly is a check on the executive. If you go to America, the issue of inauguration of the president is solely done by the National Assembly. It's the business of the National Assembly, because they understand the place of the National Assembly in any democracy. Because the legislature actually is the heart of every democracy. Because in the military regime, there will always be executive and there will always be the judiciary. The distinguishing feature between the dictatorship and the democracy is the legislature. And then you cannot begin to subject that legislature to the whims and caprices of the executive. We have all seen the politics that were played by the executive in the affairs of the National Assembly, simply because they have the power to proclaim the National Assembly and the governors have the power to proclaim the state legislatures. So I believe that that is something that should agitate the minds of the current members of the National Assembly and the members of the houses of assembly. Because you cannot truly talk about the autonomy and the independence of that layer of government without truly delinking them from the apron strings of the executive. That's what you need to do.
Well, Senator, finally, just before we close, we'll bring the conversation to an end. What is next for you? You referred to alternative dispute resolution, and I recall that in 2019, after Sen Ayogu Eze won the election, we were told that traditional rulers prevailed on you not to go to court again. And then you just allowed, sleeping dogs to lie. But what's next for you? In 2023, Are you going to run for governorship election, or are you going to try to go back to the Senate? And are you likely to leave the APC and return to the PDP, seeing that the APC is in very dire straits in Nigeria at the moment?
Well, let me start from the last one. I don't understand where you got your information that the APC is in dire straits, because what I'm seeing is PDP governors jumping into APC. And it seems to me that APC is a more stable platform, and there's no doubt that APC will form the central government in 2023. So if you are talking about me quitting the party, I won't jump from a platform that is receiving people from both APC and other PDP and other political parties, and then jump to where? Where will I jump to? I'm in APC strongly, and I believe that this APC still has quite a lot to give to Nigerians. I also believe that the issue of where I will go next is premature to be talking about it now. The party is facing congresses and a special extraordinary convention. That is what is engaging the energies of everybody in the APC. And we're already starting the process of consultation, the process of mobilization, the process of sensitization of our people in Enugu, the Southeast, and Nigeria to get ready for this process, because we need to get it right in order to be able to be ready for what INEC is urging the political parties to do. Because we want to put executives in place that will be the choices of the people at the grassroots, so that when the elections come, these people will also be able to pay the people back by endorsing those that are chosen by the people during the congresses or the primaries, either through direct or indirect primaries or through consensus or whatever method that is prescribed by the party in accordance with the Electoral Act and the laws of Nigeria. So for me, I am happy that God has kept me where I am today, and I am not really bothering my mind about where I'll go next, because I know that where I'll go next, God will lead me.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Ayogu Eze, for joining us on This Is Live, the Sunday Talk Show.